Welcome to Free Media. I'm Amber Duke.
And I'm Robbie Suave. Well, President-elect Donald Trump took to Truth Social this week to announce some of his day one plans, and tariffs are coming. Trump posted on Truth, quote, "As everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders."
The leaders of Mexico and Canada are now scrambling to call for, quote, dialogue and cooperation after Trump's announcement. Here's Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do.
Not all Republicans are on board with Trump's tariffs. However, Senator Rand Paul said that while he's likely to support the President-elect Trump's Treasury Secretary nominee, Scott Bessent, he thinks it's important to remember that tariffs ultimately make goods and services more expensive. Here's Paul on CBS last week.
Backed hedge fund manager Scott Bessent as a Treasury Secretary. He had a long financial career. He served as the chief investment officer for George Soros's funds. He's been a political donor. Elon Musk came out publicly against him, calling him business as usual. Do you favor Mr. Bessent in the role as Treasury Secretary?
You know, I've heard good things about him. I haven't made a decision. I lean towards being supportive. I don't like tariffs, but then again, I don't like the president promoting tariffs. I think tariffs are a tax on the consumer, and they ignore things like with steel. There are 80 workers working in steel buying industry for every worker making steel. So yeah, you can protect certain industries, but it's at the expense of other people. I don't believe that'll be enough for me to want to vote against Bessent, because it's also the president's position as well. I will be vocal in saying that I think tariffs are bad.
So I suspect this is the one we're going to have a little bit of a debate about, but because I tend to agree with Senator Paul, and I think even most people on the right who are supportive of what Trump's doing here would recognize that the ideal is not to have tariffs in place, because they will end up making things cost more at a time where that is the top and number one concern of the electorate. I get maybe the best possible use for them is forcing Justin Trudeau with his tail between his legs to come and knock in and promise better stuff. But you know, in terms of using tariffs to exhort a better fentanyl policy or something, it's not like the tariffs are going on fentanyl; they're going on the legally sold goods crossing borders. So this will make your groceries, in particular gas, maybe more expensive, which I know Americans are not going to want. This is one of the areas where I'm like, the president could just unilaterally do this. Shouldn't this be Congress making policy? Not that that ever actually happens. What's your take here on the tariffs?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I would start just by pointing out that there were tariffs implemented during Trump's first term. They didn't substantially raise prices, particularly the China tariffs. What really raised prices during the Biden administration, as we both know, was the exorbitant government spending through the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan. And American tariffs are done in an interesting way that's a little bit different than most other countries. So most other countries, when they institute tariffs, it's on the last price, whereas America does them on the first price. So meaning there's usually tons of middlemen in between when the pieces that are going into products get sold from China to some other country, and then eventually they get to the United States. So the marginal increase on American tariffs is usually smaller on the final good than they are when other countries are instituting tariffs, just because, again, it's on that initial price that's usually much lower, and it's typically on component parts as well. So things that go into making a final product as opposed to the product itself. So you're looking at an even smaller percentage of the final good that's actually having a tax put on it through the tariff. So I'm not as concerned about the prices being increased, just because of the way that we actually implement tariffs as a matter of U.S. policy. And I will say on the Mexico-Canada tariffs, which are the 25%, the Chinese tariffs are apparently going to be 10%. what they're being used for in that case is less about a protectionist industry supporting kind of tariff and more in order to incentivize those governments to protect the northern and southern border on their side. And during Trump's first presidency, one of the things that he did quite well with Mexico was he negotiated a deal that Mexico had to use its National Guard and military in order to protect its side of the border. And they were threatened at the time with a reduction in federal aid. So this is basically a continuation of that policy, but using a tariff as opposed to a threat of pulling away federal aid. And it actually worked. Trump was able to get that deal with Mexico. They obviously did not want to lose any of their precious
Right. Well,
foreign